discussing these three chapters, and I'm throwing specific questions at you. That sounds like there's a caveat that that maybe we're looking at this stuff is the point it's trying to make, as opposed to the
little. Are there two lines? Are there two lines? I mean, Alex, you got more kids than I do. People watching, those who have kids, how can two brothers grow up in the same family, and God is their father, and one stays around and keeps taking care of the farm, and the other one goes off and spends dad's inheritance on prostitutes and everything else? How is that possible? But yet it happens. It happens a million times a day all over the globe, right? And it seems to happen.
Not in my family. My kids
not in your family and not in my family, but
everybody else's.
I've heard tell that some people haven't raised perfect kids. And
all right.
So we have Cain kills Abel, and then Cain's family has this mark on it because like father, like son, and boy, I mean, you just look at recidivism rates of children of inmates, or any kind of matrix you want to look at. And then you got the good kid, and it seems like a description of how God created us somehow. I mean, what makes me not, both of my seminary degrees are from, one's from Fuller Seminary, which had a strong Reformed Presbyterian leaning, but then my doctorate's from a very strong Presbyterian seminary. But having said that, I can't get away from free will because it seems like that is one of the features that God created men and women with that is so different from the animal, world, is we have individual agency, and I can simply choose and decide to go against God's will.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, even as you look at these family lines and some of the examples you gave, these sometimes bad families produce a really good apple where they break the mold and they come out of that, and they in some ways they seem to be better than the offspring of the good families because they've had to travel far to get there. And then of course the other way around, where you get the black sheep in the good family that embarrasses everybody, and they try not to talk about that kid because they went bad or whatever. Are there currently two lines of humanity? And I guess the question is, if back then it was if the point of Genesis was you got Seth's kids who pursue God, and then you got Cain's kids and grandkids, etc., who just want to accomplish things and are really, they'll use violence to accomplish those things. Let me put it this way: does the biblical narrative later on advocate the idea of two lines, or is it all a big mishmash?
I think the two lines, yes and no. I think the two lines I think it's going to move us towards the idea of, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. I think that's the line. Now, I'm going to throw some Christian history to throw everybody. There's years ago, I've always been fascinated by all the denominational splits throughout the centuries. It doesn't exist anymore, but back in the late 1800s, early 1900s in America, there was an extreme Presbyterian group, Reformed Baptist group, and they existed till the 1940s. They were called the Predestinarian Two-Seed in the Spirit Baptist churches. They believed that you were born with either the seed of Cain or Seth, and therefore you were either predestined to serve God or to serve the devil. And nothing could ever change that. So they opposed Sunday school and missions because it was giving
interfering with
false hope to those destined to damnation. They didn't grow, and they petered out. And by the 1940s, there's no evidence of, I think, there were like 2 or 3 little house churches left. But that's an extreme view. We laugh at it, but an extreme view of this two-seed, two-line idea. And again, this is where I would go to the high altitude view. Yes, there are two lines. I don't think they're genetic.
What are they?
I think they are those who respond in a positive way to the call of God in their life, and those who reject and stop. And yet God continues to call them, because we both know that God's amazing grace is far more amazing than we ever suspect.
All right. So would you say that in the first couple millennia before Christ, BC, that the two lines could from a wide angle perspective be defined as Jews and Gentiles?
Well, I would question that even, because you've got Gentile believers, and you've got Gentile people who seem to be oriented. I mean, you got Darius or Cyrus, you got people who are kind towards the things of God, and then you got, you know,
But in general, I mean,
Nehemiah, you know,
we talked about the exception to the rule already, but in general, would you say the biblical, if there is an idea of two lines going through?
I don't think I would disagree with that, because I think in the Abrahamic covenant, you will be a blessing to all people
Okay.
on the earth. I think that it was inclusive, and I think that the intention of God was that the Abrahamic, the people of Abraham that were to be the priestly tribe to bring the message of God's grace and God's love to all of the nations,
Okay.
all the
So
ethnics of the world.
it's part of the message of Genesis that maybe even the reason why God flooded the earth because of the wickedness is because there was this hard, fast line between peoples, like there was a separation between the good people and the bad people, and God's like, no, I want everybody included.
I want everybody who will be in covenant with me. I think there's always been the missionary call and the and God's offer of grace to the nations, even in the Old Testament. I have a book authored or edited by one of my dear professors at Fuller in missions, Dr. Arthur Glass, who passed away a few years ago at 96. It's an extraordinarily detailed theology of mission through the entire Old Testament, from Genesis to Malachi, and so many passages about God's heart for the nations. And that the people of Israel were intended to be a conduit and a river to the nations, but time and time again they blocked it off and became a reservoir unto themselves, which is why God then went beyond the Gentiles.
So